Usually people do not want to keep believing this about themselves when they really recognize how believing an untrue, harmful story about themselves, how that impacts their life.
Welcome to Acting Smarter Now. I'm Lydia Nicole, actor, producer, and your acting career coach, here to help you cut through the noise, own your craft, and transform your career from undiscovered to unstoppable. I got a question for you. What if the key to your next breakthrough wasn't more hustle, but learning how to listen to your body and release everything that's been holding you back? Well, today I am joined by Leigh Ashcoff, a somatic healing mentor who supports high achieving professionals like you in releasing stress, healing trauma, and reconnecting with their body through a compassionate, body based approach to emotional well being. So, if you're ready, without further ado, let's go to the interview. How would you define somatic healing?
Somatic healing is a therapeutic process that includes connecting with your body. So it's not just staying in the story, it's connecting with your felt, sense, embodied experience in relation to what you want to grow and transform.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like?
Yes. So I invite you to imagine your body is a magical backpack. And throughout your life, you have collected a variety of stones in your backpack. And so somatic healing is an invitation to have a look at those stones, really taking out those stones that you've collected throughout your lifetime. And sometimes throughout the process, you'll be able to hold a stone. And as we explore it more, it might transform into a precious amethyst. And then you recognize, oh, this is something that I want to keep. This is like a gift. And so you can put that into your pack. And then there could be other stones that as we explore and get curious about them, they just actually dissolve and end up in a way just like integrating, and you don't have to carry that weight with you anymore. And so there's a bit more freedom and more discernment of what you're carrying, and a little bit more freedom to move, a little bit less weight of things that you don't need to hold on to anymore. So it's a experiential exploration that includes your history and the precious things that you want to keep and refine for yourself. What it looks like in a session is I invite the person I'm working with to share an intention for the session. And from there, I will invite them to share a recent situation that resonates with their intention. And once they share the recent situation, we'll then move into other aspects of their experience, such as what they're perceiving about themselves, emotion, and body sensation that comes up as we explore those things. So we won't stay in the story. We will use the situation of what happened to then be curious about these components and how the client, the person I'm sharing the approach with, how their body responds and reacts to that situation.
So what I found fascinating about you and what you teach, your practice, is how much of it really could be used for actors,
Mm-hmm.
because actors work with their emotions, they work with their body, they are, they're having to be in make believe situations like they're real. And sometimes it is so deep that it can affect trauma if the actor doesn't know what they're doing, because you also deal with the inner child, with that wounding that took place when the person was a child. And I
Yes.
and one of the things that I've been learning is eh, that all that stuff stays in your body.
Yeah.
I made a note that you said old wounds don't disappear with time, they wait to be seen. And I thought that was pretty profound. How can an actor who has come from a lot of trauma as a child be able to deal with it, heal it, and yet use it in their craft?
Great question. Thank you for that question. So, the first thing I will say is to know what happened to you. If something happened to you as a child, know what happened to you. The second piece is knowing what the child you once were made that mean. And in the sessions, there's an invitation to connect with the child you once were. And oftentimes that leads to a repair and a different relationship in the inner system. When I share about the inner system and you ask me about the what we're calling the inner child, that would be a part of the inner system. And sometimes parts work, which is internal family systems, IFS, is a facet of the work that I share in the sessions. It's a facet of compassionate inquiry. So when we're able to get in touch with an internal part, like the inner child, that is an opportunity for relationship, for connection, for repair. And there's a more conscious way that that part can thrive and participate in the inner system, like the inner system of the person. Oftentimes, there is a experience from someone's childhood that in a way is incomplete. And the compassionate inquiry session invites the person to connect with the child they once were and to acknowledge what happened and what they made it mean at that time. I can use myself as an example. So I experienced childhood abandonment, and a compassionate inquiry session, my intention might be, I noticed when my friend canceled plans with me, I got really afraid and really, really anxious. And I just don't even know what came over me. I had tension in my chest and my throat, and I was just completely overwhelmed for like 3 to 5 days. So I really want to understand what's coming up for me in that context with my friend. And so the compassionate inquiry session would invite me to notice, what am I believing about myself? What emotions come up? And then also the body sensation too. The perception or the belief could be, oh, my friend abandoned me. There's this intense fear, this tension in my chest and my throat, and this like overwhelm. And then oftentimes that combination of things resonates back to a childhood experience I had. And in the session, I'm able to connect with the child that I once was that experienced the abandonment, that child that I once was never had the acknowledgement. Yes, that happened. And then I get to be curious, like, what did I make that mean about myself? What was I feeling at the time? And then I can come into relationship with that part of me, the child that I once was. So we could say that's the inner child. And so I can say, oh, I can turn towards my inner child and say, I'm here with you. And that did happen then, but I'm here with you. And then I can even build trust with this part. And a lot of times this part will bring gifts along with a wound. And so through that relationship with my inner child, I can soothe and comfort that part of me. And I can also invite that part of me to really share the gifts that it brings to my whole system. And when I'm not relating with the inner child, my inner child in that way, that's when all of that fear can come up in the present moment, like, activated by my friend just canceling plans and really catching me off guard if I haven't really discovered the root of it.
So I love that we're getting to talk about this, because I think being able to embrace all of that, being able to align with it, really does help the actor in their craft, because then you
Mhm.
know the emotion you need. You know what it felt like when you were a kid. But now you're an adult and you're going to use that emotion for good and not evil.
Yes. So if someone received a role as an actor, and they were really called to the role because the character had an experience in the storyline that the actor really resonated with. And they had some experience in their past, perhaps their childhood, that made it so they really were able to bring this character to life through their own body and through their own acting skills and their gifts. So that's an example where if that person, that actor, has done their internal healing, they would have gotten in touch with the child they once were and honored like what they had experienced as a child, what they made it mean, and ideally repaired and connected with the child they once were. And so what that yields a lot of the time is an invitation to align with self-leadership and then to have a relationship with the child they once were. And that creates a different dynamic so that the gifts from this part of the actor can be used in the role. But then there's that invitation of having that internal relationship with that part so it doesn't always just take over for the whole time they're in that role, or even beyond when the role is no longer happening actively.
You talk about breath work. How does that play into what we're talking about?
Yes. First thing that comes to me is noticing breath is a way to come into the present moment. So a lot of times when we're not in the present moment, we're either in the past or in the future. So coming into the present moment can be a supportive way, and also connecting with body. So I know for me, when I connect with my breath, I'm noticing how my breath is flowing through my body. So I think the second part is that breath work can ground a person, which is another way of saying coming into the present moment. But grounding also can include being aware that you have a body and noticing it and inhabiting it more throughout every day. So breath work can be an invitation to that as well. And certain breathing, like for example, conscious breathing with longer exhales can also create a soothing to the nervous system and a calming to your system. So those are a couple things that come to mind.
Can you show me what that looks like?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I would say I could even just do those three in a row. So to begin, I invite you to just notice your inhales and your exhales. You can keep your eyes gently open or closed, whichever you prefer. So just take about 3 breaths, noticing your inhales, noticing your exhales. And you can even expand that by, as you notice your inhales and exhales, notice how your body moves. Notice you have a body. Notice as you breathe, the breath moves through you and there's a subtle movement. And then you can also begin to invite your exhales to be a bit longer than your inhales. Yeah, and you can exhale through your mouth if you're called to as well. Inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth, longer exhales.
This reminds me of an exercise I learned how to do to calm my nerves before auditions,
Hmm.
so that you center yourself in the now, in the present. So, with that breath work, how can an actor start tapping in to discover what's going on within their body?
The simplest way is to notice any body sensation or absence of body sensation, not having to change anything. So that's a very simple way to begin to notice the sensations in your body, the absence of them, or maybe even noticing where you hold tension. I could take it further if you want me to.
Yes.
Couple more examples. Yeah. So a step further than that would be to practice regularly noticing if there's any emotions that are present for you and noticing where, if there is sensation in your body, where the emotion shows up. Like, how do you know that you're feeling sad? Is there a sensation anywhere in your body that tells you that in or around your body? Oftentimes we have a different physiological experience with sadness, anger, shame. So getting to know your own system by noticing, and if it's possible for you to be able to allow yourself to feel the sensations, feel the emotion. And that's a way to process your experience in the present moment.
As actors, we are always feeling. You can go from one room to another. You can be feeling happy. You walk into another room, and all of a sudden, you are feeling terrified, sad. How does that connect with your childhood trauma?
It comes back to me with knowing what happened to you and knowing what you experienced as a child. And what I mean by that is what emotions you experienced, what you were perceiving as a child in that circumstance. And the somatic healing inherently invites you in the sessions when you explore that to notice what's happening in your body as you explore, like what happened for you in your traumatic experience. So that when you give that example, present day, walking, from feeling happiness and joy, and then walking into another room, and suddenly I feel terror or fear. It's a great question. At least the question I heard you ask is like, how can I know if that's my trauma coming up or if it's my gut sense telling me this something's not right in here? And so that is a big part of the work. And that's a discerning process. And that's a clarity pathway, I would call it. So the more that I have been courageous enough and called to connect with the child I once was and really feel and acknowledge the truth. So that means like what happened to me, what I made it mean, the emotions I felt, the repair present day with my inner child. It's the more familiar I am with what happens for me when that gets activated. And then that clarifies what's my gut sense, my intuition, my felt sense about an environment. And to be real about it, and this is my experience as a human being and as a practitioner, I find that sometimes it can be a little blended. So it can be blended, and it absolutely is a practice and a process. So it's not necessarily something I immediately know. Like sometimes I have to take the time to be gentle with myself and even step away or take a few breaths and take the time to find the clarity on it. And I find that that's just my human experience. Something might be activated from the past for me, and something might be coming up in my gut sense too. It could be both, or it could be, a combination in a different way. However, once you do the somatic healing, you become more familiar with your sensitivities, your wounds, and really that creates flexibility over time. And that is a form of resiliency. So trauma can often limit our ability to be flexible. And once we're able to be in relationship with our wounds a little bit more, there's that flexibility, and that could look like I just walked into this room and I'm feeling really afraid. So prior to trauma healing, I might just leave immediately or make a fast decision or like quit a job or something like this. But after some trauma recovery, I'm able to notice the fear in my system and stay with it a little and stay grounded enough, even if it's just like a couple toes in the present moment and saying, no, I'm here right now. I can look around and this is not dangerous. I'm safe, but something's coming up for me here. And I can visit this later today, bring it to my healing practitioner. but I don't have to run away or quit this job suddenly because I'm feeling this fear.
Once you're doing this inner work, does it start to clarify your boundaries more?
I would say yes. I, of course, find that it's different for everybody, but absolutely, I find that boundaries, healthy boundaries, the ability to create healthy boundaries, the strength to create the boundaries is oftentimes an inherent part of the work. And that's a very personal choice, person to person, and in each context. But absolutely, and knowing one's limits, knowing one's edges, and even with thinking of acting, like considering the boundaries needed for a person to take on a certain role. If that has at times like the tendency to activate certain parts of them that might be difficult to experience, maybe that person needs different boundaries in their life while they're in that role, or different self-care practices need to be bolstered more to support them to excel in that role and also have the balance for inner alignment and inner harmony.
It reminds me of the movie Last Tango in Paris. The actress who played that was violated in the film. I mean, as
Mm-hmm.
part of the process, she was violated to the point where she left the business. It was so traumatic for her that she left the business. This kind of work, I don't know that it was around that time, but
Yeah.
because of social media, we have more access to information. And thank God today, actors, when they're doing very, very intense work, especially around sexuality, things to do with sex scenes, they actually have a sex advisor in there, somebody who's,
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of the proper title for it, but they have somebody that comes in that it is mandatory. The union has made it mandatory that if you are in a union film, not non-union, but if you're in a union film, you have to have this person on set, and they walk you through as an actor to go, are you comfortable with this? Is this okay? What's not okay? And they help you with the boundaries of how far you are willing to go and what you're not willing to do. And so this is bringing up a lot of stuff, because a lot of times actors want to work, so they won't say anything, and they traumatize themselves again because they don't feel valuable enough to take care of themselves in a difficult situation. How can they start if they can't get to you and they're watching this? How
Mm-hmm.
can they start to put into practice little steps to start to recover that side of themselves that was damaged, to start the healing process?
Mm, yes, thank you. So I hear two parts. So I'll speak to two parts. One is boundaries, and the second is healing the child they once were, working with the inner child. So for boundaries, my encouragement would be to notice areas in your life where you're already comfortable creating boundaries, and those could be small things, like saying to the internet provider when they have to make a meeting to come by your house, and you can say, no, not now, but this time works. I mean, little moments like that where you are comfortable, if there's moments like that, to really become aware of how you feel in your body, notice your voice when you're already creating boundaries in your life in smaller ways. Usually it's like the bigger areas where we need to make a boundary the most that can be sometimes the hardest. The other thing that I would say is like, that would be like small steps, would be to practice speaking, practice saying no, practice saying, no, I don't like that, or I'm not comfortable with this. Practice it in the mirror. Notice your body language, like notice how you're standing. Notice how it feels for you to say that. I would encourage saying it in different ways, saying it in a way that feels authentic to you, and becoming accustomed to that. And then maybe even practicing with people who are like really safe. It could be a four-legged companion. It doesn't even have to be a human necessarily. It could be a tree. It could be like different ways to role play. So I would start with that. I think a deeper exploration could be in a somatic session, because you could then explore with the support of the practitioner, what comes up for you when you want to say, no, I don't like this, and you don't, for example. And then the second piece, which I'll respond to, like baby steps to heal the wounds from childhood experiences, ways to connect with your inner child. For me, I would suggest just knowing really clearly what happened, and be curious if you made it mean anything about yourself in particular, and to notice what emotions might have been present, and to really take the time to honor that and sit with that. That would be my one encouragement. And if any of that is too much, then I would recommend working with someone, because when you work with someone, you have someone there. You're not holding it all alone. I've definitely, as a client, gone into connection with my inner child in ways that I wasn't able to previously. So that's what I would say as an encouragement, just to start.
And how do you find the right person to work with? What are three things that someone can look for when they're looking for somebody to help them heal that inner child, align with that inner child, or a earlier adult portion of themselves that was traumatized or damaged?
One would be someone who understands the importance of safety in this work. The second one I would say is client-centered, meaning your system guides the whole process, and the practitioner or therapist does not have an agenda. And I also will encourage finding a practitioner who has some experience with parts work. So when you're asking specifically about like the inner child, I find that parts work, it changes the vernacular. It opens it up quite a bit in the sessions when the practitioner has some self-taught knowledge or certificates or training in that.
I want to go back to something you said about being able to have boundaries. One of my favorite things is, and I learned this a few years ago in the 12-step group, which is, that doesn't work for me, but thank you. It's a very simple thing, when people are trying to, because sometimes people try to force you to do something, they're either pressuring you or making you feel guilty or ashamed, or they'll pull those cards out on you. And to be able to say, that doesn't work for me, but thank you. No, thank you. That does not work. And no is a complete answer.
Mhm.
We hear it, it may sound like a cliche, but it really is a complete sentence. No, I do not want that. No, thank you. And to do it in a way that is assertive, but yet not attacking. You're not attacking the person, so that you can still be safe. Because sometimes that inner child will want to fight and
Yeah.
come out. And I'm speaking for my inner child,
Yes.
that sometimes you feel threatened. And so if I grew up in a ghetto, I grew up in Spanish Harlem, so you had to be ready to fight early on. One of my most favorite acting teachers said to me one day, he said, you could put away all your weapons, you're safe in here.
Oh,
and
that's so sweet.
and I realized that was, I was in my 20s, but I was carrying, uh, you know, um, those street weapons that I had learned to survive with.
Absolutely. Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
so as an adult, you're not that kid anymore that needs to protect themselves in the same way. You do need to protect yourself, but maybe not in the same way. So I love what you have given us in how to start the healing process, because I think
Mm-hmm.
we're all healing from something. I think we
Yes.
all have something we need to heal from. And you said this a few times. We have created a story to go with what happened.
Yes.
I want to unpack that actual line that you've been saying. We have a story we created, and a lot of people don't feel they created it. They feel like this is what happened to me. And if you challenge them, you're going to get a fight.
Sure.
So, can you talk about that? For, the stories that we bring with us.
So beliefs come up here for me when you share that in this way. So an example could be a belief, I don't belong. And the story with that could be, I'm not included. This community doesn't support me. I'm not liked here. So a useful practice is to really honor the untrue belief there, which is, I don't belong, and to gently challenge it, be curious about it, notice what happens for you in your body when you believe that. It's a thought, really. And when you believe it, it's a belief. When I have that thought, I don't belong here, I notice like some tension in my throat and my chest. And the emotion that might come up would be fear, maybe anger sometimes, but mostly it would be fear, sadness, so getting to understand like the belief that's the core of the story, and then also really being curious if that's really true, if it's absolutely true. When I work with people on beliefs, it's rare. I actually don't think it's ever happened when I've asked someone, is that absolutely true that you don't belong, for example? And I haven't had anyone say that it's absolutely true, because there is a part of them that knows that it's not true. And there might be other parts of them that are quicker to believe it, like perhaps an inner child part that hasn't been fully acknowledged in that area. So the good news about talking about the belief and exploring it and noticing your body sensations around it is that you get to then notice it when it comes up in your day-to-day experience. And usually people do not want to keep believing this about themselves when they really recognize how believing an untrue, harmful story about themselves, how that impacts their life, how they show up in the world, how they behave different. So, honoring the untrue core belief, getting to know your felt sense experience around it over time gives you the opportunity to choose something different. And even a step deeper and a step further would to just be, to just be. So, yes, I want to believe about myself. I don't want to believe that I don't belong. I want to believe that I'm a part of life and I'm always a part of everything that is just unfolding. But a step further and deeper is to know that I can just be. I can be me in every moment, and I can just be here.
As actors, and I will speak for myself, there are certain groups that you try to get into and they're not really open to having you.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as an adult, what I've learned is that there are certain rooms that don't align with what I want to do. And so I have learned that when I walk in a room, if I don't feel the joy and the goodness and the mobility that the group is moving forward, I will step away. In my teens, early 20s, I tried to force myself into those groups. And as I have done some work on myself, what I've learned is that I don't necessarily want to be in every group. I want to be very strategic about where I am. Does it align with my mission, my purpose, my vision for my life? Because not every group works with what it is that you want to do. So my question for you is, because I know a lot of actors struggle with this, the rejection. Rejection is huge. They have not learned how to process rejection in a way that does not harm them, does not make them feel unaccepted, or make them feel like they did something wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How can actors walk in their center, breathing, doing their breath work, and connecting with their intuitive self, and really listening if they go into a room that does not feel comfortable, that does not align with them, that they are able to walk out gracefully, still owning themselves and not feeling like they did something wrong or they're not good enough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes. So there's three parts that I'm called to respond to. It's rejection, knowing your wants and needs, and then the last part was making it mean something about yourself. So I just want to say those so I don't forget. So one thing I would love to offer here is that rejection is a perception. And we can look at it in a different way. What happens, for example, if I try out for a role and I don't get the part? Well, I tried out for a role and I didn't get the part. That's what happened. But seeing that as, oh, I'm rejected, they rejected me, that's a perception. And even just saying it, I start to have feelings. I can feel like a little sadness coming, a little up fear, little sensation here. So once I have that perception, my body and my emotional body and my physical body and my energy body are responding to it, even saying it here. So my one part in reflection of that is to notice that perception. And if it's still tough, I would say bring it into a session so you can really work on it in your own way, like really discovering what's coming up for you around that. The second piece I will respond to is to just encourage people to know what you want and need in community, whether it's professional or personal. And when you're really clear on that, and that can change over time, it doesn't have to be a fixed set of things. But then there's that clarity of like, oh, these are my wants and needs. Maybe some are negotiable and some aren't. And what is this community, professionally or personally? Is it a good fit? And I hear you sharing that with me, that you have that clarity. And so that's my reflection around that. And I also want to acknowledge that feelings can still come up. If someone says, oh, you know what? I really wanted to be a part of this community, but it actually isn't a good fit for me. And it's actually, I feel sad because I actually liked these people or I wanted to do this project, but it's layered. The human experience is layered. And I see in there like authenticity and attachment. So it's when I honor my authenticity, what's true that I want and need, and I stay with myself and I stay with that as opposed to sacrificing that to be a part of what happens. So like what, feelings might come up. It might not be the most comfortable, but what do you want to choose? Do you want to choose your authenticity or do you want to choose the attachment? And really, authenticity includes attachment. So great example of that. And then the final one would just be my encouragement to be really mindful of what you make it mean about yourself, if anything. Especially if you're making a experience or situation mean something negative about yourself. Like, for example, if there was a community and it didn't meet my wants and needs, and I recognize that, and I also notice that I walk away with this like meaning making that like, there's something wrong with me. That's why this didn't work. And if I'm really able to bring awareness to that, I can become more and more curious. Is that true? No, it's not true, actually. It's just that it wasn't a good fit or it wasn't the right time or whatever it is. And if that's still tricky or sticky, you can always bring that to a session, or, if not a session, a conversation with someone you trust who's on the level to talk about that, and to just be really mindful if you notice that happening.
And also who's objective, because sometimes when we bring it to people that we trust, they may love us so much that they'll get upset for
Yes.
us. And so there's you got to use a little wisdom. You want somebody who's not going to want to burn down the fort, but
Yes.
who's going to calm you down, calm you in the situation. It also, as you were talking, what showed up for me was trust, trusting yourself,
Mm-hmm.
loving yourself, and being transparent with yourself. That
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to put the labels on. You can just say, this doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
They're great people, because the other side of that is I hate them. They weren't nice to me. It's like we can go, and as actors, we love to be in the drama.
Mm-hmm.
I'm speaking for me, love to be in the drama. And I told them, and I'm not gonna do this. And and we're spending all that fabulous energy instead of on the stage where it should be, we're putting it to use where it's not going to do us any good. And so to be able to love on yourself and trust yourself, that even if you cannot identify what that feeling was in that room, and you don't have to label it, but understand that feeling didn't work for you. It
Mm-hmm.
didn't make you feel safe. I'm real big on safety. Am I feeling safe? Because as a child, I wasn't safe. I didn't feel safe. And so for me as an adult, safety is everything.
Yes.
That I want to be safe. I want to be celebrated and not feel like I'm tolerated, where people are rolling their eyes or, making snarky comments.
Yes.
But to go, oh, and you could tell the difference. Your body can tell the difference when you are in a room where people love you just because you are you, Leigh. They go,
Mm-hmm.
yes, Leigh is in the room. Oh, we're so happy that we have you, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to being in a room where people are giving you the side eye. And I would say that's a real thing. People looking at you, especially in Hollywood, where there's a lot of judgment. So you as a performer, you as a talent have to disconnect from that enough not to have your own judgment about it, but to keep yourself safe.
Yes, safety is so important. And I will reflect and add the just the power of internal safety. So if there is, if my inner child is like really sensitive to certain things, having that relationship with that part of me in my internal world to create safety with that part of me is really a powerful, deeper part of the healing at times. And as we mentioned earlier, like appropriate boundaries. So if a person is moving through like a deeper part of healing their trauma and recovering, certain environments might be a no for a little while to give space to that healing process. And really, it's up to each person, what they want to say no to. So all I wanted to say is yes, and highlighting that internal safety. And it's a beautiful thing because when I am able to come into connection with internal parts of me, my inner child feels unsafe in certain situations, then I can step in and nurture and protect this part of me. And what that means is that, yes, I still have to pay attention to my environment and make choices about that, but I'm also not dependent on other people to show up a certain way for me to feel safe. And I acknowledge that like it's layered. and it's very contextual. But I hope that makes sense what I'm saying, just to create space for that beautiful inner safety that we can all learn to create that's so custom for each of us. It's so unique.
Yes, I agree. You were talking, it reminded me of, I did stand up for 14 years. And so part of my childhood trauma was alcoholism in my family and in my community, and not feeling safe when people were taking substances. You
Yes,
know,
yes.
that there was a lot, the bells would go off, and it's like, oh my God, what chaos is going to ensue. So in my 20s, I started doing stand up, and I've now find myself back in that arena where
Mhm.
you have a lot of people drinking. People can't, probably should not be drinking because they can't control themselves, and you have chaos. And I
Yes,
had to learn how to take care of my child,
yes,
act as an adult, be watchful, but not be fearful, and not feel like something horrible was going to happen, and be able to assess it as an adult and go, okay, is there really danger here? Or is this person just had too much to drink, or whatever they did? How, to know the difference. And that's where wisdom comes in. That's where, but it only happens when you've done the work to heal. Because hadn't I not been doing the work at that time to heal, I probably would have hurt somebody. I would have hurt somebody,
right,
because that
right.
child would have taken over and said, no, we're not doing that. We're
Yes.
not doing that. So what made you want to do this kind of work?
That's a great question. One part of it was that I found myself in roles in relationships where I was offering support to people who were going through really big transitions, whether it was personally or oftentimes through like death of a loved one. And further than that, the other major calling that I have had towards this work is my background in creativity eventually sort of manifested through me as a vision of seeing the therapeutic relationship as a creative unfolding, and learning that the practitioner or the therapist really uses themselves as the instrument in the relational exchange was so inspiring to me. And I really was able to experience and see the creative aspect of healing in relationship. And that really called me to pursue the different trainings that I took.
I want to go back a little bit to talk about your creativity. What were you doing creatively before you got into doing this practice?
Yeah, so I formally studied photography at the School of Visual Arts. And eventually I started to do video and some graphic design as well throughout the years after that, after graduating. And I also played music too. So it sort of evolved in different ways. And I would say it went from photography, so like the visual arts, into music, and then more into the healing arts. So from there, I really moved more into yoga and learning about neuroscience and neurophysiology. And then years later, it came into more somatic healing for me.
I love that your company is called The Art of Trauma Recovery,
Hmm, thank
because
you.
it just just intuitively it feels creative. Just, as I went on your website, I was like, yeah, she feels like an artist, just by the title of it. That was my assumption. Okay, all right, this is what Leigh does. and she brings it all together. So I'm glad to hear that. It confirms what I felt when I saw the title, because
Mm.
it's a wonderful title. In your training with all these different parts to make up your practice, what are a couple of takeaways that you learned from your teachers or your professors that
Mm.
you really added to almost be like a pillar of what it is that you do?
So I have three that come to mind. One takeaway, one of the many from all three. First would be Dr. Gabor Mate. One thing I'll share today is the practice of bringing attention to tension. Oftentimes that's tension in the body. So just that simple turning towards the tension as a way of relating with ourselves in a new way. It's been a powerful practice. Second teacher would be Richard Schwartz. I'm not sure if he's a doctor. So Richard Schwartz and Frank Anderson of Internal Family Systems, that there's no bad parts of anybody. Even the challenging parts of ourselves, when we're willing to be curious, have an intention. Usually it's to protect us in some way. So that's been a powerful way for me to see myself and other people. It's like a real paradigm shift. And the third, I would say, Thomas Hubel has taught me that when a person is able to get in touch with what they're experiencing in the present moment, that is a way to process what's happening. And when we're able to do that, we are not borrowing from the future. And this was one that just has, it will always be with me because, like many other human beings, for many years, I pushed away the fear I felt. I wanted to push away the anxiety because I didn't know, I didn't have the tools that I needed to feel that, to understand the root of it, and to do internal repair. So it's through the healing process that I recognize I can feel this discomfort now. And when I don't, it is a borrowing from the future because my system will continue to present it for me as often as I'm alive. And so if I'm not going to feel it now, I will be asked to feel it in the future. And if not in my lifetime, potentially in my offspring or in my family lineage, it could be just passed on.
Hmm.
So those are the three things that come to mind. Thank you for asking that.
Wow. I've never heard borrowing from the future, but I will never forget it. I think that is, my daughter and I have this thing we say, we're doing this today so our future self can thank us.
Yes.
But
Yes.
but how you phrased it is the opposite, right? We are doing things so that in the future we can be better off.
Mhm.
One of the Another thing I always tell my daughter is, we will eat when we're trying to accomplish something, be her wanting to accomplish something or myself, eat tuna today so you can have steak tomorrow.
Mhm.
Be okay with the sacrifice you have to make today so tomorrow is easier. If you're
Mm.
So it is the same thing. I just have never heard the borrowing from the future. That is so powerful. Such a, oh my goodness.
I
um
agree. I concur. And I thank Thomas Hubel for that. It's an incredible perspective, and I appreciate the one you share too. It's very similar.
yeah, it's just the other side of the coin, right?
Hmm. Absolutely.
What would you like the audience to know that we didn't touch on? Because I mean, I know there's so much we didn't touch on, but that from this conversation you think would add to it.
What comes to me is to share that it's possible to create inner harmony. And to sometimes the way of thinking about it is to reorganize your inner world so that you are functioning more optimally. And that is for your day-to-day lived experience in your body. And it's also in the work that you do. And I would also want to highlight for any of the actors listening how powerful I see parts work to potentially be, the art of trauma recovery, including parts work, how powerful and supportive that could be to different roles that you might find yourself in for work. Also, how to organize your inner system when you're fully embodying a role during that season, during the days of that season. And I see that that work is always really custom. So I honor that too, that one person who's taking on a role, they themselves have a history. They themselves have an inner world with different parts. And so really having a look at the whole and finding, like a harmony and finding an optimal way to honor all parts and embrace all parts and maybe balance it in a way that supports that chapter, that season of life. It's incredible. And I from what I can see, given the work that I do. And so I also just want to thank you, Lydia, because your questions have helped me to see these things about the work that I hadn't previously.
I think it's important that people are not enslaved by their childhood,
Yes.
but that it allows them to look at what happened in their childhood and use it as a gift that they can share with others. There's a scripture in the Bible that says, what the devil intended for evil, God has worked out for good.
Hmm.
And I always speak that to myself when I'm going through something that is difficult. It says, okay, the devil might be trying to use this for evil, but I'm going to use this for good. I'm going to show people how to get through this difficult time. And I think it's important that people are have the proper tools to be able to get through difficult childhood or difficult events or relationships or whatever it is, to live their best life. And having seen so many people never having that opportunity or giving themselves the opportunity to live their best life because they were so enslaved by something that traumatized them and caused them hurt. I am for the healing. I am for the deliverance. I am for the being free from your shackles, being free from those things that have held you hostage. And
Hmm.
so I appreciate what you have shared with us and how you've walked us through certain things. I really do appreciate it. I thank you so much. I thank you. You've illuminated me to certain lovely things that I had no clue of. And I love your practice, the art of trauma recovery. That's it for today's episode of Acting Smarter Now. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you're thinking. If today's conversation opened something up for you, please support the show by buying me a coffee. It helps keep these powerful conversations going. And don't forget to catch the next episode coming right up, where we continue to give you the tools to move you through your career, grounded, aligned, and unstoppable.